When you think of Miami, what comes to mind? Sunshine, right? Vibrant streets, maybe taking a walk through South Beach. It really is a walker's paradise. But here's the crazy part. There's this chilling paradox. Miami is also one of the most dangerous places in the entire country to be a pedestrian. So, how can a city be both of those things at the same time? Well, let's dive in and figure it out. I mean, look at this. You've got these amazing, lively neighborhoods like Wynwood and Brickell that are just begging to be explored on foot. But then you have this dark side. The city is a total hotspot for pedestrian accidents. It's a contradiction that unfortunately has some really devastating consequences. To really get why this is happening, we've got to look a little closer. All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we're going to look at the shocking scale of the problem. Then, we'll dig into the reasons Miami's streets are so risky. After that, we'll untangle the legal rules of the road, understand the real human cost of a collision, and finally, we'll walk through the exact steps you can take to protect yourself if the worst happens. Okay, so first up, just how serious is this problem really? Let me tell you, the stats are pretty alarming, and they point to a crisis that's happening year after year. Think about this number, over 1,000. That's roughly how many pedestrian crashes happen in Miami-Dade County every single year. This isn't just some random bad year. It's a constant, terrifying reality. And you have to remember, behind every single one of those numbers is a real person, a family, a life that's been turned completely upside down. So, the big question is, why Miami? What is it about this city? What's the specific recipe that makes its streets so incredibly dangerous for people on foot? Let's unpack the key factors. Well, it's not just one thing. It's this perfect storm of high-risk elements all crashing together. You've got super dense city traffic mixed with a constant flow of tourists who, just aren't familiar with the local driving chaos. Then you layer on the huge nationwide problem of distracted driving and a real culture of speeding, especially after dark when it's hard to see. You put all that together, and you've basically created a uniquely hazardous environment. And this quote really gets to the heart of it, right? It's about the human element. We're not always talking about huge, complex mistakes. It's often about these simple, tiny moments. A driver just glances down at a text or fiddles with the GPS. In those few seconds, a life can be shattered. It's just a sobering reminder of the massive responsibility you have when you get behind the wheel. And this danger isn't spread out evenly across the whole city. Nope, it's really concentrated on these main arteries. If you've ever been to Miami, you know these names. Biscayne Boulevard, US 1, Collins Avenue. These roads are just a constant churn of commuters, tourists, delivery trucks, creating these well-known hotspots where collisions are just way more likely to happen. Okay, so with all these things going on, what actually happens when a collision does occur? The answer, as you can imagine, gets complicated, and it all comes down to Florida's specific traffic laws. These rules are absolutely critical for figuring out who's at fault. And here it is. This is probably the single most important rule to know. In Florida, if a pedestrian is in a crosswalk where they're supposed to be, drivers must yield. That's not a suggestion, it's the law. And it's shocking how many accidents happen just because this one simple rule gets ignored. But it's not always 100% the driver's fault. Florida law has this system called comparative negligence to figure out who's to blame. What this means is that if a pedestrian is found to be partially at fault, let's say they crossed against the don't walk signal, their compensation gets reduced by whatever their percentage of fault is. And here's the really crucial part. If you're found to be more than 50% responsible, you can't recover any damages. Zero. Let's look at a quick example to see how this actually works. Imagine the total damages from an accident add up to $200,000, but the court decides the pedestrian was 25% at fault. Well, their award is then reduced by that 25%, which is $50,000, leaving them with a final recovery of $150,000. As you can see, this calculation becomes a huge point of argument in these cases. So, we've covered why these accidents happen and the laws that surround them. But now we need to look at the consequences, and honestly, they're often catastrophic. You have to realize, unlike someone inside a 2-ton metal box, a pedestrian has absolutely zero protection. The force of that impact can easily cause a traumatic brain injury. And we're talking about effects that can last a lifetime, things that impact memory, your personality, even your ability to just live independently. Another truly devastating outcome is a spinal cord injury. This can lead to partial or even complete paralysis, requiring around-the-clock medical care for the rest of someone's life. The human cost of these accidents is just staggering, and it goes so far beyond the initial crash. And beyond that immense physical toll, the financial burden can be absolutely crushing. Victims can seek compensation for a few different things. Medical expenses, as you can see, are often the biggest chunk. That covers everything from surgeries to long-term rehab. But it also includes lost wages for all the time you can't work, damages for the physical and emotional pain and suffering, and compensation for any permanent disability that's going to affect your ability to earn a living in the future. Okay, so this brings us to our final and maybe most important section. What on earth do you do if you find yourself in this horrible situation? Knowing the right steps to take can make a world of difference in protecting your health and your rights. So, in those chaotic moments right after an accident, what should you do? There are 5 critical steps. Number 1, your absolute first priority is to get medical help immediately, even if you think you feel fine. Adrenaline is a powerful thing, and it can easily mask serious injuries. Next, always call the police so there's an official report. Then, if you're able to, start gathering evidence, take photos, get witness contact info. And here's a huge piece of advice: be extremely careful when speaking to insurance adjusters by yourself. And finally, contact a lawyer who really understands these specific types of cases. Now, there's a really critical detail in Florida's no-fault insurance system that you have to know about. Your own insurance, your personal injury protection, or PIP, is the first thing that kicks in. But the amount of money you can get depends on one thing: a diagnosis of an emergency medical condition. If a doctor officially gives you that diagnosis, you can access up to $10,000 in benefits. Without it, you could be capped at just $2,500. That's a $7,500 difference, which is exactly why getting checked out by a doctor right away is so vital. And one last thing. The clock starts ticking immediately. Florida has a very strict statute of limitations. You have just 2 years from the date of the accident to file a lawsuit. Now, 2 years might sound like a long time, but believe me, investigations and negotiations can eat up months. If you miss that 2-year window, your right to seek legal compensation is just gone forever. So acting quickly isn't just a good idea, it's an absolute necessity. All of this really brings us to a big fundamental question. Of course, we all have a personal responsibility to be careful, right? To look both ways. But is that enough? As our cities get bigger and traffic gets worse, does the responsibility for keeping people safe fall more on individuals to just be extra vigilant? Or does it fall on public officials to design streets that are just inherently safer for everyone from the start? It's definitely something to think about the next time you step into a crosswalk.